I've been driving trucks for almost 15 years, and I've seen my fair share of weird stuff on the road. But nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what happened that night. It was late October, around 2 a.m., and I was hauling a load through a rural stretch of highway in Kentucky. The kind of road where you don't see another vehicle for miles, just darkness pressing in from both sides, the trees leaning over like they're trying to whisper secrets. I had the radio on low, sipping the last of my gas station coffee, just trying to push through another hour before stopping for the night. The first thing that set me on edge was the road itself. 1 minute it was clear, just endless blacktop stretching ahead, and the next, there was something lying across both lanes. I hit the brakes, my headlights catching what looked like a massive tree branch, maybe even part of a fallen trunk. The bark was pale, stripped clean in places like it had been dragged there. I remember gripping the wheel, my pulse quickening. There hadn't been a storm, no wind, no rain. So how the hell had that gotten there? As my truck slowed to a crawl, instinct told me something was off. I flicked my high beams on, scanning the tree line, and that's when I saw it, movement in my side mirror. At first, it was just a shadow, quick and low, slipping between the trees. Then another. My stomach dropped. 2 figures emerging from the darkness, running straight for my truck. They weren't just wandering onto the road, they were coming for me. My foot hovered over the accelerator as my brain caught up to what my body already knew. This wasn't random. This was a setup, a damn ambush. I slammed the gear shift, ready to gun it in reverse, but my headlights caught something else in the last second. Tire marks. Faint, but there. Not from my truck, these had been left by someone else who had stopped here before me. And suddenly, I had a gut-wrenching realization. I wasn't the first one to fall for this trap. I didn't have time to think, only react. My foot slammed on the gas, but in my panic, I'd forgotten I was still in neutral. The engine roared, but I wasn't moving. My heart shot up to my throat as I fumbled, yanking the gear into reverse just as the first figure reached my driver's side door. For a split second, I saw his face in the side mirror, wild eyes, mouth slightly open like he was mid-breath. He wasn't some lost traveler or good Samaritan. He was a predator, and I was the prey. The truck lurched backward, tires screeching as the second figure, bigger than the first, lunged toward my passenger side window. He had something in his hand, a crowbar or a pipe, raised high as if he was about to swing. I jerked the wheel, angling the trailer, trying to put as much distance between them and me as possible. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, a loud bang against the door. The first guy had grabbed the handle, yanking at it with both hands, his face twisted in frustration when it didn't budge. I don't know if it was instinct or sheer dumb luck, but I reached for the air horn and blasted it, long and loud. The sound shattered the silence, an unnatural mechanical wail cutting through the night. And it worked. The guy at my door flinched, stumbling back, and the one with the crowbar hesitated for just a second too long. That was all I needed. I slammed the truck into drive, tires screeching as the trailer swung, barely missing them as I surged forward. The branch, whatever it was still in my way. I didn't care. I plowed straight through it, wood cracking and snapping beneath my tires. The truck rocked violently, but I didn't let up. My hands were like a death grip on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead, but I still risked one glance in the mirror. The 2 figures were just standing there now, watching me go. Not running after me, not trying to stop me, just watching. And that scared me more than anything else. I kept my foot on the gas, my whole body tense, expecting to see headlights pop up in my mirror. Some rusted-out pickup roaring onto the highway to chase me down. But nothing happened. Just darkness swallowing up the road behind me. No cars, no sirens, just that empty, endless stretch of asphalt. It didn't make sense. These guys had set up an ambush, gone through all that effort, and just let me go? My hands were still shaking as I fumbled for my phone. No signal. Not surprising, considering how deep in the middle of nowhere I was. I told myself I'd call the cops as soon as I hit the next town. But that didn't sit right with me either. What would I even say? "Hey, officer, some guys tried to hijack my truck, but I ran over their little roadblock and got away." They'd probably ask me if I had proof, if I got a good look at their faces, if I could even remember where it happened. And that was the part that made my stomach turn. I glanced at my GPS, trying to pinpoint where I was. The road looked normal, just a long, lonely highway cutting through the woods. But when I zoomed out to check for upcoming exits, my breath caught in my throat. According to the map, I had already passed this stretch of road almost 20 minutes ago. I should have been miles ahead, closer to town. But somehow, I was right back where I'd started. A cold chill crept up my spine. I flicked my eyes to the odometer. It showed I had been driving at full speed. The truck was moving. I felt myself moving. But if that was true, then how the hell did I end up in the same place? My grip tightened on the wheel as I scanned the trees on both sides of the road, looking for landmarks, signs, anything to prove I wasn't losing my mind. And then I saw it. A large, pale branch lying across the highway, snapped clean in half. The same damn one I had just driven through. My stomach dropped. This wasn't possible. I had destroyed that thing. I felt it break under my wheels, heard the wood splinter, saw the debris scatter in my mirrors. But there it was, whole again, as if I had never touched it. My knuckles went white on the wheel, my breathing uneven. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around, to get off this road. But before I could, I saw movement in my side mirror. Them, the two figures stepping out of the tree line like they'd been waiting for me. The smaller one tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me, while the bigger guy stood stiff, shoulders squared. Same spot, same stance, as if nothing had changed, as if this was all happening again. I didn't hesitate this time. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, my truck barreling toward the branch again. But this time, as my headlights washed over it, something shifted. The wood looked wrong, too smooth, too pale, like bone. My gut clenched, and for the briefest moment, I swore I saw something move beneath it. I plowed through anyway. The truck jolted violently, my teeth rattling as the tires tore through the obstacle. But just as I passed over it, I heard a sound, low, wet, like something splitting open. A sharp, piercing wail rang through the night, so loud it cut straight to my bones. I didn't dare look in the mirrors. I just drove, as fast as that rig could carry me. It wasn't until I hit the outskirts of a small town that I finally pulled over, shaking, my body drenched in sweat. My phone had signal now. I could have called the cops. But what the hell would I tell them? That some guys tried to trap me, then time looped and the road started fixing itself? They'd think I was insane. Hell, maybe I was. But I know what I saw. I avoided that stretch of highway ever since. I don't take night shifts in that part of the state anymore. And whenever I hear about a trucker going missing out there, I wonder if they saw it too, if they got out, or if they're still driving that same road over and over trying to escape something that won't let them go. I've been driving long-haul routes for over 15 years. I know every trick in the book, how to keep myself awake, how to handle icy roads, how to spot a scam, or at least I thought I did. This happened about 6 years ago, somewhere on a stretch of I-80 in Nebraska. It was past midnight and the highway was nearly deserted. Just me, my rig, and the endless dark. I remember thinking I should pull over soon and grab a few hours of sleep at the next truck stop. But then I saw it, an old sedan sitting on the shoulder, its hazard lights flickering weakly. A man was standing next to it, waving one arm like he was desperate. Now, truckers help each other out. It's an unspoken rule. Even if it's not another trucker, we still stop if someone's in trouble. So I slowed down, pulling over a few feet ahead of him. In my mirror, I saw him start walking toward me. Tall guy, maybe late 30s, wearing a faded red hoodie and jeans. His face was shadowed under the dim glow of my taillights. I rolled down my window a crack as he approached. "Need a hand?" I asked. The guy let out this nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, man, my car won't start. I think the battery's dead." His voice had a slight rasp to it, like he was either a smoker or just getting over a cold. He nodded toward the sedan. "You got cables?" Something about him made me hesitate. He kept glancing around, like he was expecting someone else to show up. But I didn't want to be that guy, the one who drives past someone in need. So I sighed and put the truck in park. "Yeah, I got cables in the back. Pop the hood, I'll take a look." As I stepped out, the night air hit me, cold and still, the kind of quiet that makes your skin prickle. When I reached the front of his car, I placed my hand on the hood out of habit. And that's when I froze. The metal was cold. Not just cool from the night air, cold like it hadn't been running for hours. My stomach dropped. Cars don't just shut off and go cold in minutes, especially not in the middle of the highway. Every instinct in me screamed that something was off. I lifted my hand from the hood slowly, trying to act natural, but my pulse was hammering in my ears. "When did it die on you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. The guy hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Maybe 10, 15 minutes ago?" He forced a laugh. "Guess it cooled off fast, huh?" I took a step back, and that's when I noticed something else. The driver's seat was empty, but the door was slightly ajar. If his battery was dead, wouldn't he have been sitting inside, waiting? My gut twisted. This wasn't right. I needed to get out of there, fast. "You know what?" I forced a smile, already turning toward my truck. "I just remembered my jumper cables are shot. Can't help you, man. Sorry." That's when I felt it. A sharp sting, right at the base of my neck. Not a punch, not a slap. Something thin, fast, like a needle. My vision blurred instantly. My knees buckled. The last thing I saw before the world tilted sideways was that guy stepping closer, his hand still raised, something small glinting between his fingers. I don't remember hitting the ground. One second I was standing, the next I was drowning in darkness. But I wasn't out completely. I could hear, muffled, distant, like I was underwater. Footsteps. The sound of my truck door creaking open. My body felt like lead, my limbs useless. But I was still there, trapped in my own head, screaming at myself to move. Then, voices, more than one. A second man. His voice was rough, impatient. "Hurry up, we don't have all night." A hand gripped my arm, dragging me like a sack of grain. My boots scraped against the asphalt. I wanted to fight, to swing, to run, anything, but my body wasn't responding. My mind was sluggish, sinking deeper into whatever they dosed me with. "Check his cab," the first guy muttered. "Keys should still be in it." A pause, then a low curse. Shit, he locked it. For a split second, I felt relief. They couldn't get into my truck, but that relief vanished when I heard the second guy sigh. "Forget it. Just toss him in the back. We'll figure it out later." Panic surged through me. My body still wasn't working right, but my fingers twitched, just barely. They weren't expecting me to fight. If I had one shot, it was now. As they shifted my weight, struggling to lift me, I let myself go completely limp. Dead weight. The guy holding me grunted, "Damn, he's heavy." That's when I threw my head back as hard as I could. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I caught one of them square in the nose. He cursed, stumbling, and in that split second of chaos, my body jolted back to life. I hit the ground hard, my legs barely holding me, but adrenaline took over. I lunged toward my truck, fumbling for the door handle. Behind me, the first guy shouted, "Hey!" But I didn't stop. My hand slammed against the lock. My fingers found the key still in the ignition. I didn't look back. The engine roared to life, and I floored it. In my side mirror, I saw them standing there, one clutching his nose, the other watching me disappear down the highway. No chase, no gunshots. Just two silhouettes fading into the dark. I never reported it. What could I even say? 2 guys faked a breakdown and drugged me, but I got away. No license plate, no names, just a cold hood and a needle in the night. But I never stop for stranded drivers anymore. And if you're smart, you won't either. I've been a trucker for over 15 years, and I've had my fair share of weird encounters on the road. You see some strange things when you spend most of your life driving across the country, but nothing ever got under my skin quite like what happened last summer. I was hauling a load from California to Texas, passing through a long, empty stretch of Arizona desert. It was late, past midnight, and the road was nothing but a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the endless dark. No towns, no lights, just the occasional sign reminding me how far I was from the next gas station. I had my CB radio on, like always. It kept me company when I was alone on the road, and sometimes I'd chat with other truckers to break up the monotony. That night, though, the airwaves were mostly dead, just static, and the occasional faint conversation I could barely make out. I was about to switch it off when a voice crackled through, clear as day. "Hey, big guy, you still awake?" The voice was male, smooth, almost friendly, but something about it made my skin crawl. It wasn't the usual trucker chatter. No handle, no location, just a direct question. I hesitated before answering, but loneliness got the best of me. "Yeah, I'm awake." "Who's this?" I kept my tone casual, not wanting to sound spooked. There was a short pause. Then the voice came back. "Just a fellow traveler. You looked like you could use some company." My hands tightened on the wheel. That wasn't normal. CB radios don't work like cell phones. People don't see you unless they're close by or you tell them where you are. My eyes darted to my mirrors, but the highway behind me was empty, just the faint glow of my taillights fading into the black. I played it cool. "Yeah? Where you headed?" A safe question, nothing that gave away too much. Another pause. Then, "Same direction as you." The way he said it, like it was obvious, sent a chill down my spine. I reached for my coffee, more to steady my nerves than anything, and took a sip. My truck was the only one on the road for miles. No headlights, no taillights. Whoever was talking to me wasn't in a rig, or if they were driving without lights. I kept my eyes on the road, but my grip on the wheel tightened. "That so?" I said, forcing a chuckle. "Guess we're both headed east then." I was fishing, trying to get a clue about this guy. Maybe he was just messing around, some bored trucker playing games on the radio. But something felt off. The voice came back, smoother this time. Beautiful night, isn't it? Real clear sky. I bet you can see every single star out here." That sent another wave of unease through me. He was right, of course. The sky was an endless stretch of black, dotted with stars, but that's something anyone could guess. It was what he said next that really made my stomach drop. "Bet it's nice having the window down, getting some fresh air. You always rest your arm like that when you drive?" My blood turned to ice. My left arm was resting against the open window, elbow propped up like I always did. But there was no way he could know that. No headlights behind me, no cars passing in the other direction. Just an empty highway and the sound of my own tires on the pavement. I glanced at my mirrors again, scanning the darkness, but saw nothing. "How the hell do you know that?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I intended. The radio crackled with static, then he laughed, a slow, amused chuckle like he enjoyed my reaction. "I see a lot of things," he said, "like that thermos sitting next to you. What's in it tonight? Coffee? Or something a little stronger?" My breath hitched, and for the first time in years, I felt real fear creeping up my spine. My thermos was right there in the cup holder, just like it always was. It was an old, dented thing, dark blue with a scratched-up logo from some truck stop I couldn't even remember. No way he could have seen it. I yanked my arm back inside the cab and rolled up the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice lower now, more serious. There was another pause. Then the voice came back, still calm, still way too amused. "Come on now, no need to get all worked up. We're just talking, right? Just a couple of night riders keeping each other company." The casual tone made my skin crawl. I reached for my CB dial, ready to turn it off, but then he said something that froze me in place. "Besides, you wouldn't want to miss your next turn, not with that little detour up ahead." I stared at the GPS screen. My next turn was coming up in a few miles, an off-ramp leading to a smaller highway. But how did he know? I hadn't mentioned my route. I hadn't said a damn thing about where I was going. My gut was screaming at me now, every instinct telling me to ignore that turn, to stay on the main road no matter what. I swallowed hard and kept my foot steady on the gas. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "but I'm not interested." Silence. For a second, I thought maybe he was gone. Then the static crackled, and his voice came through again, softer now, almost disappointed. "Suit yourself," he murmured, "but you should really check your back seat." Every hair on my body stood on end. My back seat. The cab of my truck wasn't big, just the standard sleeper with a bunk and some storage compartments. I knew damn well there was no one back there. I would have seen them when I got in. But in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I turned my head, I'd see something I didn't want to see. My hands clenched the wheel, knuckles white. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road. "Nice try," I said, but my voice lacked confidence. The CB remained silent. No laughter, no response, just dead air and the distant hum of static. My pulse pounded in my ears. I reached out and flipped the radio off, the cab sinking into eerie silence, save for the steady hum of my engine. I told myself it was just some sick bastard messing with me, that it was all just a coincidence. Maybe he was parked at a rest stop somewhere. Maybe he'd passed me earlier and caught a glimpse of my truck. Hell, maybe I was just overtired, my brain playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew none of that made sense. I drove straight through the night, ignoring every stop, every turn. When the sun finally crested the horizon, washing the desert in pale orange light, I felt the tension in my chest finally ease. I pulled into the next truck stop, parked, and took a deep breath. Before getting out, I forced myself to glance in the back seat, just to prove to myself there was nothing there. It was empty. Of course it was. But as I reached for my thermos, something made me stop. It wasn't where I'd left it. Instead of sitting in the cup holder, it was on the passenger seat, upright, perfectly placed. My hands went ice cold. I hadn't moved it. I knew I hadn't moved it. And yet, there it was, like someone had set it there just to let me know. They'd been there all along. I've been driving trucks for nearly 15 years, and I've seen a lot of strange things out on the road. You spend enough nights crossing empty highways, listening to static on the radio, and your mind starts playing tricks on you. But this was different. This happened about 7 years ago, somewhere along I-80 in Nebraska. I was running a long-haul route from Chicago to Salt Lake City, pushing through the night like I always did. It was past midnight when I decided to pull into a rest stop, one of those tiny, out-of-the-way ones with just a few vending machines and a couple of picnic tables. No cars in the lot, no other truckers. Just me, my rig, and the hum of the highway in the distance. I grabbed a coffee from the vending machine and leaned against my truck, taking a moment to stretch my legs. The air was thick with the scent of damp asphalt and pine. That's when I noticed him. A man sitting on the curb near the entrance, half hidden in the glow of a flickering streetlight. He had on an old denim jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. A cigarette dangled between his fingers, the ember flaring as he took a slow drag. I nodded at him, the way truckers do, a silent acknowledgement. He nodded back, but didn't say a word. There was something off about him, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I didn't think much of it at first. People linger at rest stops all the time, waiting on a ride, stretching their legs, whatever. But as I turned to head back to my cab, something gnawed at me. A feeling, like I shouldn't turn my back on him. Still, I shook it off and climbed into my truck, setting my coffee in the cup holder. When I reached for the ignition, instinct made me glance through the windshield. The man was gone. Just gone. I frowned and leaned forward, scanning the lot. No sign of him. No sound of footsteps, no car doors shutting, nothing. The only thing left was his cigarette, still smoldering on the pavement where he'd been sitting. The ember pulsed weakly, a little curl of smoke drifting into the cold night air. That was the moment my stomach twisted, a deep, primal sort of unease settling in my bones. It was like the world had skipped a frame, like something had erased him from the scene while I wasn't looking. I sat there for a few seconds, gripping the steering wheel, my heartbeat picking up. Maybe he'd just walked off. But where? The rest stop was bordered by thick trees, and beyond that, just miles and miles of empty highway. No cars had pulled in, no engines revving, no footsteps crunching on gravel, just silence, thick and unnatural. I told myself I was being paranoid. Long nights on the road do that to you. But something about that cigarette, still burning, still fresh, kept nagging at me. I forced myself to look away, shaking the feeling off. I had a schedule to keep, so I fired up the engine, put the truck into gear, and pulled out onto the highway, trying to put some distance between me and whatever had just happened. For the next few miles, I kept checking my mirrors, not sure what I was expecting to see. Maybe the guy stepping out onto the road behind me, maybe a car's headlights flashing in pursuit. But there was nothing. Just the dark ribbon of asphalt stretching out ahead, my own headlights carving through the night. Eventually, my nerves settled. I took a deep breath, reached for my coffee, and turned on the radio to drown out the silence. Then I saw him again. He was standing on the shoulder of the highway, just outside the reach of my high beams. Same denim jacket, same baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't hitchhiking, wasn't waving me down, just standing there facing the road like he was waiting for something. My stomach dropped. There was no way he could have gotten here before me. I'd been driving nonstop for at least 15 minutes, pushing close to 70 miles an hour. No car had passed me, no turnoffs, no side roads. As I blew past him, I fought every instinct telling me to check my mirrors. I didn't want to see him again, but I did it anyway. And the moment I glanced at the side mirror, my whole body went cold. He was still there, standing in the same spot, unmoving. But it didn't make sense. At the speed I was going, he should have been a tiny speck in the distance. Instead, it was like he hadn't moved at all, like the road between us hadn't changed. I pressed my foot down harder on the gas. My truck roared forward, eating up the miles. I kept my eyes locked on the road, trying to ignore the way my skin prickled. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was just tired, seeing things that weren't there. But then, the CB radio crackled. The static hissed through the speaker, sharp and uneven, like someone was trying to tune into a dead station. My hands tightened on the wheel. I hadn't touched the CB in hours. It had been silent since my last check-in with dispatch. But now, a faint voice crackled through the interference. At first, it was just a whisper, broken and garbled, like it was coming from far, far away. Then, clear as day, I heard it. Need a ride? My whole body tensed. The voice was low, rough, like someone who'd spent a lifetime smoking. And worse, I recognized it. I'd only heard one person speak that night. The man at the rest stop, the one who had vanished. I reached for the CB mic with a shaking hand, my thumb hovering over the button. But what the hell was I supposed to say? Who are you? Where the hell did you come from? I didn't want answers. I wanted this to be some kind of mistake, some random trucker's signal bleeding into my channel. So I did what any sane person would do. I turned the CB off. The moment I did, my headlights flickered, just for a second, just long enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. And in that brief, awful moment of darkness, I swore I saw something standing in the middle of the road, right in my path. A figure, denim jacket, baseball cap. Then, light again, and the road ahead was empty. I barely had time to process what I'd seen before I realized my hands were shaking against the wheel. My mind scrambled for explanations, anything rational. A shadow, a trick of the light, exhaustion messing with my head. But deep down, I knew better. Something wasn't right. I pressed harder on the gas, wanting nothing more than to put as much distance between me and that stretch of highway as possible. Mile markers blurred past, and the only sound in the cab was my own ragged breathing. I kept my eyes locked on the road, refusing to glance at the mirrors, refusing to give in to the feeling that someone or something was still watching me. Then, the air in the cab changed. It got colder. Not like a draft or the AC kicking in. Bone-deep cold, like I had just stepped into a meat locker. My breath fogged in front of me. My hands felt stiff against the wheel. I reached for the heat controls, fumbling with the dials, but nothing changed. That's when I heard it. A slow, deliberate exhale. Not mine. The breath came from right behind me. Long, steady, like someone was sitting in the cab with me, just a few inches away. I went rigid, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to keep my eyes on the road, to pretend I hadn't heard it. Then, in the dim glow of the dashboard, I saw something move. A shadow, just at the edge of my vision. My stomach twisted into knots. The air was so cold now that my teeth started to chatter. I wanted to hit the brakes, to jump out of the truck and run. But where the hell was I supposed to go? I was in the middle of nowhere, miles from the next town. I did the only thing I could. I floored it. The engine roared as I pushed the truck to its limit, my pulse hammering in my ears. The faster I went, the more the pressure in the cab seemed to shift, like something was being pulled away. And then, just like that, it was gone. The cold lifted. The weight in the air vanished. The night felt normal again. I didn't stop driving until I hit a well-lit truck stop an hour later. I parked under the brightest lights I could find and sat there, gripping the wheel, my entire body shaking. I forced myself to check the back of the cab. Empty. Nothing there. But I knew. I hadn't imagined it. I never drove that route again, never stopped at that rest area. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on the road, I think about that cigarette, still burning, still fresh. Like someone had just been there. And I wonder, if I had waited a few more seconds before getting back in my truck, what would have happened? I've been driving trucks for almost 15 years, and I've seen my fair share of weird things on the road. Shadowy figures darting between trees, abandoned cars with their engines still running, strange lights hovering over empty highways. But nothing ever made my stomach drop like what happened that night. It was just past 2 a.m., the stretch of highway ahead of me endless and dark. I'd been driving for hours, the hum of the tires against the pavement blending into the white noise of my exhaustion. When I saw the glowing sign of a gas station up ahead, I figured it was as good a place as any to stretch my legs, use the restroom, and grab another cup of coffee. I pulled into the lot, parking close to the building under the bright fluorescent lights. It was one of those 24-hour stations, but at this hour, the place was nearly deserted. Just an old sedan by one of the pumps, and a single clerk behind the counter inside. I made sure to lock my cab like I always did. You don't leave your truck open, not with the kind of cargo some of us haul. It's muscle memory at this point. Keys out, lock engaged, a firm tug on the handle to double check. Satisfied, I headed inside, nodding to the clerk as I made my way to the restroom. I was inside for maybe 5-6 minutes tops. When I walked back out, coffee in hand, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, just a gut feeling, like the air was suddenly heavier. Then I saw it, the passenger side door, slightly open. Not much, just enough to notice, but I knew damn well I had locked that door. My pulse kicked up as I stopped a few feet from the truck, staring at it, my breath curling in the cold air. Maybe I hadn't shut it all the way? Maybe the latch was loose? I wanted to believe that, I really did. Then, in the dim reflection of the side mirror, I saw it. Movement inside the cab. A shift, the faintest outline of a shape. Someone was sitting in my truck. My first instinct was to back away, but my truck was my livelihood. I couldn't just let someone take it. Instead, I moved slow, careful, pretending like I hadn't seen anything. My left hand slid into my jacket pocket where I kept my folding knife, my fingers wrapping around the handle. I took another step, then another, my boots crunching against the pavement. My eyes stayed on that side mirror, tracking the movement inside. Whoever was in there wasn't shifting much. They were just waiting. I reached the driver's side door and hesitated. My breath was shallow, heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had two choices: yank the door open and confront whoever was inside, or step back and call the cops. But something told me I wouldn't have time for the second option. A slow, creaking sound came from the other side of the cab. The passenger door. It was opening. My grip tightened on the knife. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "Hey," I called out, "you're in my truck. You need to get the hell out." No response. The door eased open further, the dim station lights casting a long shadow on the ground. And then a foot stepped out. A filthy, bare foot. The sight of that bare foot froze me in place. It wasn't just dirty. It looked raw, like whoever it belonged to had been walking for miles on rough pavement. My breath hitched as the rest of them emerged. A man, or at least something shaped like one. His jeans were torn to shreds, his shirt hanging in tatters off a frame so thin I could see the ridges of his ribs even under the dim light. His head was tilted down, greasy strands of hair falling over his face. I took a step back, instinct screaming at me to run, but the man moved first. Not towards me, but around the truck, circling it like a predator testing its prey. That's when I realized he wasn't alone. Another figure shifted in the shadows near the pumps, then another by the dumpster. My throat went dry. How the hell had I missed them? They'd been waiting, hidden, like they knew I'd stop here. My truck wasn't just a random target. My fingers were still clenched around the knife in my pocket. But what was a damn blade against 4 of them? A fourth figure slinked forward from the darkness near the building, arms too long, gait unnatural. I couldn't move. My body was screaming at me to do something, anything, but fear had locked my joints in place. That's when I heard it, a faint sound from inside my cab, a rustling, like something shifting in the sleeper area. My stomach twisted. There was someone still inside. I couldn't stay frozen. If I did, I wasn't making it out of that lot. My truck was my only advantage. If I could get in, lock the doors, and gun it out of there, I'd have a chance. But that meant getting past the thing that had crawled out of my cab. The man, if he was a man, was still pacing, head twitching like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. The others had closed in, their bodies shifting unnaturally, their faces still hidden in the dark. I forced myself to move. One step back, then another. Then I lunged. I reached for the door handle, ripping it open so fast it nearly swung back on me. But as soon as I did, I felt it, a hand, ice cold and clawing at my wrist. I yelled, jerking back, the knife finally coming free from my pocket. I slashed blindly, felt it connect with something solid, heard a sharp intake of breath. Then I was inside, slamming the door shut, locking it with shaking fingers. My chest heaved, my eyes darted to the sleeper area. Empty. But I knew I hadn't imagined that sound. Outside, they didn't bang on the truck, didn't scream or claw at the windows. They just stood there, watching. Their faces hidden just beyond the reach of the lights. I didn't wait to see what they'd do next. My hands found the keys, twisted them hard. The engine roared to life. As soon as I threw it into gear, they moved, scattering like cockroaches, disappearing into the darkness beyond the station. I floored it, tires screeching against the pavement, not daring to look back. I drove until the sun came up. Didn't stop, didn't let myself think. When I finally pulled over at a crowded rest stop, I got out, checked the cab. The passenger door was still locked. Nothing looked out of place. But I knew what I saw. I don't stop at highway gas stations anymore, and I never, ever leave my truck unlocked. I've been driving trucks for almost 20 years now. I've seen all kinds of weird things on the road. Strange people, animals darting out of nowhere, even a full-on tornado once. But nothing has ever shaken me quite like what happened one night in Arizona, along a long, empty stretch of Route 191. It was the kind of road where you could drive for miles without seeing another soul. Just desert on either side and an endless black sky above. I had a delivery to make in El Paso, and with a full tank of gas and a fresh cup of coffee, I was prepared for a long, uneventful haul. Or so I thought. I first noticed the car when I checked my side mirror sometime after midnight. It was maybe 100 yards behind me, just far enough that I couldn't make out any details. At first, I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people drive late at night, and maybe they were just another traveler trying to push through to their next stop. But after 10, 15, 20 miles, the car never changed its distance. No matter how much I sped up or slowed down, it stayed in the exact same position, like it was tethered to me by an invisible rope. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I tapped my brakes a few times, seeing if I could force them to pass. Nothing. I slowed to nearly 40, waiting to see if they'd get impatient. Still, they stayed there, unmoving, matching my pace perfectly. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The road was completely empty, no exits, no towns for at least another 50 miles. Just me and this car that refused to act like a normal driver. I turned my radio down, suddenly feeling the silence press against me. The air in the cab felt heavier, like I wasn't alone anymore, even though I knew I was. Then, after what felt like forever, the car finally made a move. It pulled into the oncoming lane, speeding up just enough to come level with my trailer. I expected it to pass, but instead, it just hovered there beside me, just far enough that I couldn't see inside. Then the high beams came on. Bright, blinding white light flooded my mirrors, so strong I had to squint just to keep my eyes on the road. My hands tightened on the wheel as my heart pounded. And that's when I caught a glimpse of something that made my stomach drop. In the side mirror, just for a split second between the glare of the high beams, I saw it. The car had no license plate. No numbers, no state, nothing. Just a smooth, blank space where the plate should be. That didn't make sense. Even temporary plates have some kind of markings, some indication that the car was legally on the road. But this? It was like it had never been registered, never belonged anywhere. A brand new car fresh off the lot might not have plates yet, sure, but this wasn't some dealership test drive at 1 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. My stomach twisted. My first thought was, maybe it was some psycho messing with me, but the longer I stared, the less that explanation made sense. Who drives for miles, perfectly matching speed, just to flash their high beams at a trucker on an empty highway? My gut told me to ignore them, to keep driving, but a deep, instinctive part of me knew something wasn't right. I didn't want to look directly at it, but my eyes kept flicking to the mirror, trying to get a better glimpse. The car was sleek, black, low to the ground, like a modern sedan, but something about it looked off, like its shape was just slightly wrong, like it didn't quite belong on the road. Then, as if it could sense me watching, the car did something that made my blood run cold. It veered closer, just enough that I could see into the driver's side window, and there was no one inside, no driver, no passenger, just empty blackness, like I was staring into a void. My breath caught in my throat, and my hands clenched so tight around the wheel that my knuckles went white. This wasn't possible. It had to be some kind of trick, some weird reflection. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe the glare was messing with my vision. But deep down, I knew what I saw. I don't know how long I stared before my instincts finally kicked in. I needed to get the hell out of there. Without thinking, I slammed the gas pedal, pushing my rig as fast as it would go. The engine roared, the truck shuddering under the sudden acceleration, but I didn't care. I just needed distance. I watched in my mirror as the car dropped back, falling into the shadows again, exactly where it had been before. Like it was toying with me, like it was waiting. I kept my foot pressed down on the gas, my heart hammering in my chest. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless, but my eyes were locked on the mirror. The car stayed behind me, never falling too far back, never getting too close, just waiting. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me somehow, even though I had seen with my own eyes that there was no driver. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Was this some kind of automated vehicle? A prank? A hallucination from too many hours on the road? But none of it made sense. Then, without warning, the car made its next move. It surged forward, faster than any normal sedan should be able to, and pulled up right beside me again. The high beams flicked on, even brighter this time, flooding my cab with a harsh white light. My pulse spiked. My instincts screamed at me to look, to see if there was something, anything, inside that car. But I was too scared. The weight of something unnatural pressed down on me, and every nerve in my body told me that if I looked too long, if I tried to understand what I was seeing, something would go horribly wrong. I forced my eyes back on the road. That's when I saw the overpass up ahead. It was the first real structure I had seen in miles, an old concrete bridge spanning the highway with nothing but darkness underneath. An idea formed in my panicked brain, desperate and reckless, but it was the only chance I had. If I timed it right, maybe I could lose the thing. Maybe I could make it disappear as suddenly as it had appeared. I waited until I was just about to pass under the bridge. Then, at the last possible second, I killed my headlights. The highway went completely dark, my truck now nothing more than a rolling shadow. As I passed beneath the overpass, I counted the seconds in my head, my breath held tight in my chest. 1, 2, 3. I flipped my headlights back on, my fingers trembling. My eyes darted to the mirror. The road behind me was empty. The car was gone. No taillights fading into the distance, no shadow lurking just out of sight, just an open stretch of highway disappearing into the night. My breath came in shallow gasps, my pulse thundering in my ears. I kept glancing at the mirror, expecting it to reappear, to somehow materialize out of nothing like it had never left. But mile after mile passed, and there was nothing. I didn't slow down. I didn't pull over. I just kept driving, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers ached. The silence in the cab felt suffocating, like something unseen was still lingering there with me. My mind kept replaying what I had seen. No license plate, no driver, those high beams burning into my skull. What the hell had I just escaped from? It wasn't until I reached the next town, nearly an hour later, that I finally let myself stop. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the bright fluorescent lights, and just sat there for a while, trying to convince myself that it was over. The guy at the counter must have noticed how shaken I looked, because when I went inside to grab a coffee, he gave me a weird look and asked if I was okay. I almost told him everything about the car, about the lights, about how I'd nearly lost my mind out there. But what was I supposed to say? That I'd been chased by something that shouldn't exist? In the end, I just muttered something about being tired and left it at that. But as I walked back to my truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that somewhere, out on those empty highways, the car was still there, waiting. And the worst part? I still don't know if it let me go, or if it's just biding its time.